morning, Asia. Good evening, America. You are watching World DNA with me, Raisha Sehgal.
And I'm Jyotsna Kumar. And on the show today, President Bashar Al-Assad fled Syria as Islamist rebels swept into Damascus, and reports say he is now in Moscow. His fleeing has triggered celebrations across the country. In Syria, crowds toured the ousted leader's luxurious home after rebels declared he had fled. What happens next in West Asia? We'll discuss this on the show today.
Also on World DNA, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has claimed that the country has lost 43,000 soldiers on the battlefield since the start of Russia's full-scale invasion in February 2022. And this comes as Russian forces continue to make advances along the eastern front line. We will bring you more on this story and much more, but first, a quick check on the headlines. Ousted Syrian President Bashar al-Assad landed in Moscow just hours after Islamist rebels take over his country.
The UN Security Council will convene an emergency closed-door meeting regarding Syria in the aftermath of President Bashar al-Assad fleeing the country. The meeting is requested by Russia.
The fall of the regime is a fundamental act of justice. It's a moment of historic opportunity for the long-suffering people of Syria to build a better future for their proud country. As we all turn to
US President Joe Biden says deposed Syrian leader Bashar al-Assad should be held accountable, calls the nation's political upheaval a historic opportunity for Syrians to rebuild their country.
Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky claims that 43,000 Ukrainian soldiers have been killed fighting Russia in almost 3 years of war, and that is some 370,000 have been wounded.
US President-elect Donald Trump calls for an immediate ceasefire and negotiations between Ukraine and Russia to end the madness, prompts Ukrainian President Zelensky and the Kremlin to list their conditions.
Ghana's former President John Dramani wins a historic comeback after the ruling party accepts defeat, with voters appearing to punish them for the government's handling of an economic crisis.
Amid growing India-Bangladesh tensions, India's Foreign Secretary to visit Dhaka to meet Yunus in a first such visit by senior Indian official to Dhaka since the ouster of Sheikh Hasina.
Delhi is set to experience a sharp dip in temperatures, with the mercury expected to dip around 3 degrees Celsius from December 10th, predicts India's meteorological department.
Asian shares drop led by South Korea ahead of central bank meetings this week. Political instability and West Asia tensions weigh on markets, though strong US jobs data lifts growth optimism.
Lando Norris wins season-ending Abu Dhabi Grand Prix. The victory seals McLaren's first Formula One Constructors title in 26 years. And our top story comes from West Asia. Ahmed al-Shara, leader of Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, addressed a cheering crowd at the iconic Umayyad Mosque in Damascus after the fall of Bashar al-Assad in Syria.
This victory, my brothers, is a new chapter in the history of the entire Islamic nation. It is a turning point for the region. How many dangers have we avoided? He handed Syria over to the Iranian ambitions, spreading sectarianism and corruption throughout the country.
Assad and family have landed in Moscow and have been granted asylum, claimed a Russia state media, and that is hours after rebel took control of the country.
Turn to the question of what comes next.
US President Joe Biden said that America does not officially know of Assad's whereabouts, but noted reports that he fled to Moscow. He said Assad should be held accountable.
As we all turn to the question of what comes next, the United States will work with our partners and the stakeholders in Syria to help them seize an opportunity to manage the risks.
Biden also confirmed the U.S. airstrikes against Islamic State targets inside Syria. Biden said U.S., which has a force of around 900 troops in southeast Syria, is clear-eyed about the fact that ISIS will try to take advantage of the vacuum. We will not let that happen, he did add.
Meanwhile, most areas of Damascus saw little to no intense fighting. On the streets, anti-government soldiers and their supporters fired weapons in celebration. They toppled statues symbolizing the Syrian government and set several security checkpoints ablaze. Also, they ransacked the presidential palace.
In another development, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has ordered the seizure of the UN-patrolled buffer zone in the Golan Heights. Israel says the 1974 disengagement agreement with Syria is no longer valid. A curfew has been imposed in the buffer zone as tensions rise in the region.
This is a historic day for the Middle East. The collapse of the Assad regime, the tyranny in Damascus, offers great opportunity, but also is fraught with significant dangers. This collapse is a direct result of our forceful action against Hezbollah and Iran, Assad's main supporters. It set off a chain reaction of all those who want to free themselves from this tyranny and its oppression.
Meanwhile, the United Nations Security Council will convene for an emergency closed-door meeting regarding Syria, and this is according to multiple diplomatic sources. They say that the meeting was requested by Russia on Sunday. And well, for more on this, we are now being joined live by Dr. Avner Cohen, live from California. He's the professor of non-proliferation and terrorism studies at the Middlebury Institute and also a West Asia expert. Welcome to WION, Dr. Cohen.
My pleasure.
Dr. Cohen, the question in everybody's mind right now is what comes next? Biden said that it is a moment of risk and uncertainty. Do you share that sentiment? And also talk to us about how the fall of Assad regime in Syria affects the regional balance, the complexion in West Asia.
Well, Syria has been a fault line, and the collapse or the eruption of that fault line so quickly is quite remarkable. It's quite exceptional. And the question is where the remains going to fall. There could be all sorts of possibilities. Syria is a very complex country from ethnographical point of view, from demographic point of view. It's a federation of a lot of Arabs, a lot of minorities within the overall Sunnis majority. And what's going to be the future of Syria? Syria itself was created as an artificial entity after the end of World War I on the ashes of the Ottoman Empire. Modern Syria was held by two strong men, the Hafiz al-Assad and his son Bashir, in the last 54 years. Both of them were called the Butcher of Damascus. How Syria is going to be organized now in the relationship between religious and secular, between the various components, the various constituents, it's a very, very big question. It will take months, if not years, to settle in a way. It's clear that it's the major collapse of the Shiite axis run by Iran, but how it's going to, what's going to replace it, how it's going to be rearranged, it's an open question.
Right.
I do expect that, just to finish, that some kind of effort, international effort, possibly run by France and other involved countries, the Arab Leagues, United Arab Emirates, possibly Saudi Arabia. In other words, coalition of strong countries from the region outside will try to bring together all those elements, until now being called the opposition, which are so many of them, to try to work out some kind of a new constitution and a new country called Syria.
Right, and it's interesting you mentioned international elements because, of course, there are a lot of powers that had their base. For example, Russia had its military bases right now. Now that we have Assad who has fled to Moscow, how do you think Russia will try and settle down his bases there? And, of course, how will Turkey react?
I think those bases will be soon evacuated. I assume that Russia will make a very strong warning that the safety of those bases must be held, and anybody who would dare to attack or to intervene would have, there would be consequences. But with the gone of Assad, I think that Russia has nothing to do there. It will take time until some kind of stable coalition of elements will be settled. And I think that the Russian clear, given their war in Ukraine, they will be living, I assume, and I think it will be very fast.
Dr. Cohen, you do speak of how it's not going to be easy for the rebels to govern Syria post-Assad regime. If you can just outline and talk to us about the challenges that the rebels face in governing Syria, because we also know that the HTS and the SNA, the Syrian National Army, they both also face challenges within themselves. So how do you see things panning out moving forward in Syria?
It's very difficult to say. It's coalitions of number of large organizations and tens of smaller organizations, local, various ethnicities, the Druze, the Cherkess, the Alawite, who were not opposite, but now they're going to try to have a voice of their own with the demise of Assad. It's all sorts of elements in Syria that will have to, whether it will be through some kind of coalition, some kind of constitution that would create a new Syria with some sort of confederation with relatively autonomous districts or regions. It's difficult to say. Aleppo, that used to be a very strong during the Ottoman Empire, actually it's even larger than the capital Damascus, is a very strong. It has been destroyed by the Russians in 2016. So it will require a great deal of negotiation between all those elements. And it's very, very difficult to predict how it will go. And I think they need a great deal of guidance and support from other strong powers from the region and from outside the region.
Right. Do you think that this might lead to another tensions? Because we know that Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu has ordered the seizure of the UN patrol buffer zone in the Golan Heights. And of course, he said that the agreement with Syria is no longer valid. Do you think tensions can rise there?
I think it was primarily an effort to seize opportunity. And in particular, as you know, Israel has bombed today some at least 100 sorties of various residues of weapons, stockpiles of ammunition, in particular chemical weapons and the like, to take sure that those weapons would not fall into hostile elements to Israel. I think that at the same time, the Israeli would look for some kind of connections. They have some with the Druze, they had some with the Kurds in the northeast, and they will try to explore in order to end this Shiite axis run by Iran, to try to cooperate and to find a way. But those kind of connections, you cannot do it overnight. It will take time. So I think Israel wanted to restore and to create a certain sense of deterrence, to establish its strong presence in the region, but at the same time to explore ways of cooperation with many other elements within the new Syria that is going to evolve.
Right. That's really interesting. And of course, the developments do come in. And of course, we have to see how Syria does take part and how the political situation turns out. But thank you so much, Dr. Ravin Cohen, to join us.
Thank you very much. Bye.
All right, moving on. Abu Muhammad al-Golani today is the face of Syria's triumphant rebels who now control the Damascus city as Bashar al-Assad has fled and sought asylum in Moscow.
And during the Syrian civil war, he established the Nusra Front, swearing loyalty to Al-Qaeda, but in 2016 distanced himself from the group.
Renamed his force as Jabhat Fateh al-Sham and then Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, like we know, that's HTS, and strengthened dominance in Idlib province in Syria's northwest corner.
Golani spent years to rebuild his image, portraying himself as a champion of plurality and tolerance. In recent days, the insurgency even dropped his pseudonym and began referring to him by his real name, Ahmad al-Shara.
Despite all of this, the US, which designated Golani as a terrorist in 2013, is still offering a reward of up to $10 million for information about him.
And staying with the story, after the fall of Assad's regime in Syria, U.S. President Joe Biden has said that the United States is committed to finding and bringing back Austin Tice, a freelance journalist who disappeared 12 years ago.
Right, and he disappeared 12 years ago while he was covering Syria's civil war. Biden stated that officials must still identify exactly where Tice is after his disappearance in August 2012 at a checkpoint in a contested area west of Damascus.
What does the U.S. know about where Austin Tice might be and if he's safe?
We believe he's alive. We think we can get him back, but we have no direct evidence of that yet. And Assad should be held accountable.
Have you directed an operation to go get him, Mr. President?
Is Assad in Moscow?
Get who?
Austin Tice.
We won't want to get him out.
Yes, sir.
We have to identify where he is.
In a news conference, Tice's mother, Deborah, said that the family had information from a source that her son is still alive. Deborah has been long campaigning for Tice's release.
Austin Tice, a former U.S. Marine turned journalist, was abducted near Damascus in August 2012. A few weeks later, a video surfaced showing him blindfolded and surrounded by armed men. Since then, no group or government has claimed responsibility for his disappearance.
All right, we move to our coverage of the Russia-Ukraine war. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has said that the country has lost at least 43,000 soldiers since the beginning of the war 3 years back.
He also said that 370,000 Ukrainian soldiers were wounded fighting against Russia, adding that half of these wounded troops were able to return to the battlefield.
Now, this was the first time in 3 months that casualty figures were shared by President Zelensky, since the subject remains highly sensitive as Ukrainian forces continue to lose more territory to Russian forces. The number, however, is much lower than the American estimates, which remains close to 70,000 deaths. In a data that was released by U.S. officials and military experts in August last year, the U.S. report also added that at least 35,000 soldiers were missing in action.
The latest casualty figures released by President Zelensky are reflective of the impending change at the White House, with U.S. President-elect Donald Trump pushing both Moscow and Kiev to sit down on the negotiation table.
In an interview, President-elect Trump said that his incoming administration will reduce the aid to Ukraine, which the United States has been steadfastly backing since its invasion by Russia. Now, notably, the interview was taken before Trump's trilateral meeting with France's Emmanuel Macron and Ukraine's Volodymyr Zelensky.
Well, after the meeting with President Zelensky in Paris, Trump took to Truth Social and asked both Russia and China to work on a peace deal with Ukraine. He also claimed that close to 400,000 Ukrainian soldiers were killed on the front lines.
Now, following the Trump's call for an immediate ceasefire in negotiations, Kremlin spokesperson Dmitry Peskov said that Moscow was open to peace talks with certain conditions, adding that peace negotiations had to be based on agreements reached in Istanbul in 2022 and on the current battlefield realities. Peskov also accused Kiev of refusing to negotiate a settlement to the almost 3-year conflict.
Moving on, the demonstrations continue in Georgia's capital, Tbilisi, for the 11th day, as thousands gathered to voice their anger at the government's decision to halt European Union accession talks.
Of course, and the protesters waving EU flags and chanting pro-European slogans hit the street outside the Georgian parliament. They are opposing the ruling party Georgian Dream's refusal to pursue EU membership talks and alleged electoral fraud during the October 26th parliamentary polls.
და არის სრული აბსურდი, ანუ არავინ გეგმავს მაიდანს, უბრალოდ ეს არის მშვიდობიანი მოქალაქეების აქცია, რომლებიც ითხოვენ იმ უფლებებს, რა უფლებებიც მათ აქვთ და კონსტიტუციის, აი ამ 78 მუხლის აღსრულებას, რასაც ეს მთავრობა სასახად არ ღვევს, ხო?
The Georgian police dealt the demonstrators with force. Water cannon and tear gas have been used to quell the demonstrations. Officials have said that over 400 demonstrators have been arrested since November 28th.
The Georgian Prime Minister made an announcement last week that Tbilisi will not seek EU accession. Critics accuse the government of backsliding on democratic reforms and moving closer to Moscow.
The Georgian Prime Minister has dismissed the demonstrators as violent groups controlled by the opposition forces and labeled them as liberal fascists. He insists that this so-called revolution has failed.
Meanwhile, the United States and the West have hit out at the Georgian government for crackdown on the protesters, but the government has refused to back down. Well, before we end this bulletin, here's a roundup of all that's making headlines in the world of climate.
From the bustling trading floors of Wall Street to the vibrant exchanges of Asian stock markets, WION breaks it down for you to make sense of what's happening, as we reveal the key factors behind events, strategic battles, and the game-changing business decisions that shape the world. We bring you all of this and more on World Business Watch. WION, India's global voice, the channel that brings you the biggest stories from across the world through India's lens. Now available in more than 190 countries worldwide, because we believe that the world is one. Watch us in Africa, Europe, USA and Canada, South America, Asia Pacific, Middle East and North African regions. Also available on these digital platforms across the world. WION. World is one.
Ready to dive into your daily dose of news?
Bringing you what's trending in the West and all that's setting trends in the East.
And all of this served up with a side of insightful banter.
We don't just bring you the latest stories.
We bring you your talking points for the day.
And while you do that, from the busy streets of New York, I will provide you with deeper insights on the developments through the course of the day in the US.
And I will be here at the WION headquarters, getting you all the action from the universe of sport. All that you need to know about your favorite teams and players, right here.
The show that keeps you ahead of the global curve. A conversation you'd want to be a part of.
A place where news becomes an engaging exchange.
We bring you stories that impact your present.
This is World DNA.
Join the conversation.
Know more, understand better, think ahead. Hello and a very warm welcome. You are watching Gravitas with me, Molly Gambhir. Get the facts, not the bombast. On the 26th of March, dynamic pricing, Baloch separatists, Gravitas cuts out the clutter. Gravitas keeps calm when others scream. Gravitas brings news to life. Weekdays 9 p.m. IST, 3:30 p.m. GMT. Gravitas. Seeing is believing.
Welcome back. You're watching World DNA with me, Raisha and Jyotsna. There's lots lined up on the show, but first, a quick check on the headlines.
India's Defense Minister Rajnath Singh is in Russia on a 3-day visit. He is likely to hold talks with Putin. Singh is also scheduled to participate in the commissioning ceremony of the INS Tushu warship.
Amid growing India-Bangladesh tensions, India's Foreign Secretary to visit Dhaka to meet Yunus in the first such visit by senior Indian official to Dhaka since the ouster of Sheikh Hasina.
Asian shares drop led by South Korea ahead of central bank meetings this week. Political instability and West Asia tensions weigh on markets, though strong U.S. jobs data lifts growth optimism.
Ousted Syrian President Bashar al-Assad landed in Moscow, claims Russian state media, hours after Islamist-led rebels take control of his country.
The UN Security Council will convene an emergency closed-door meeting regarding Syria in the aftermath of President Bashar al-Assad fleeing the country. The meeting is requested by Russia.
The fall of the regime is a fundamental act of justice. It's a moment of historic opportunity for the long-suffering people of Syria to build a better future for their proud country. As we all turn to the question.
U.S. President Joe Biden says deposed Syrian leader Bashar al-Assad should be held accountable, calls the nation's political upheaval a historic opportunity for Syrians to rebuild their country.
Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky claims that 43,000 Ukrainian soldiers have been killed fighting Russia in almost 3 years of war, and that some 370,000 have been wounded.
U.S. President-elect Donald Trump calls for an immediate ceasefire and negotiations between Ukraine and Russia to end the madness, prompts Ukrainian President Zelensky and the Kremlin to list their conditions.
Lando Norris wins season-ending Abu Dhabi Grand Prix. The victory seals McLaren's first Formula One Constructors title in 26 years.
Amid bursting ties between India and Bangladesh, India's Foreign Secretary Vikram Misri is all set to visit Dhaka this month.
And this will be the first high-level diplomatic outreach to Bangladesh since the fall of the Sheikh Hasina government.
In a statement released by the Ministry of External Affairs, the one-day visit is part of the structured interactions with Bangladesh. The MEA spokesperson Randhir Jaiswal said, Misri's visit comes at a time when there's an ongoing war of words between the two countries, which escalated in recent weeks after the attacks against the Hindu minority in Bangladesh and also the arrest of ISKCON leader Chinmoy Krishnadas.
Following the act of vandalism at the Assistant High Commission of Bangladesh in Tripura's capital, Agartala, Bangladesh government on Friday called back its acting Deputy High Commissioner, Shikdar Mohammad Ashrafur Rahman in Kolkata, and Arif Mohammad citing an urgent consultation.
Ahead of the Foreign Secretary level talks between the two countries, Bangladesh's foreign advisor, Mohammad Tohud Hussain, said that the Bangladesh's interim government was optimistic about easing the diplomatic tensions through discussions and bilateral meetings. He went on to say that he was expecting to have a fruitful discussion in order to come out of the current standoff between Dhaka and New Delhi.
All right, India's capital, Delhi, is set to experience a sharp dip in temperatures, with the mercury expected to plummet to around 3 degrees Celsius from December 10th.
Well, this comes day after Delhi's AQI stayed in the poor category at 276. India's weather department said that the significant drop marks the onset of a cold wave that will grip not only the national capital but also the entire northern belt. And this includes Punjab, Haryana and Uttar Pradesh. Early indications of the cold wave are already visible, with Hisar in Haryana recording a low of 4.7 degrees Celsius, which is one of the coldest spots in the region. As of now, Delhi's minimum temperature hovered around 7 degrees Celsius.
However, the chilling conditions are predicted to intensify due to a combination of factors, including snowfall in the northern hills and the influence of a western disturbance, which can bring light showers to the plains. Weather Department has further warned of dense fog across parts of northern India on December 9th and 10th, potentially reducing visibility and impacting transportation.
Residents are urged to prepare for this frigid weather by taking precautions to stay warm, especially during the early mornings and late evenings when the cold will be more severe. Along with the cold wave, residents of Delhi are also facing worsening air quality. The air quality index in the national capital dropped to the very poor category on December 8th, reaching 302 at around 4 p.m. The Supreme Court has, however, allowed the Commission for Air Quality Management to relax the GRAP Stage 4 restrictions in Delhi NCR, downgrading them to GRAP Stage 2 due to the improved air quality.
However, the GRAP Stages 2 and 1 will remain in effect across the region.
South Korea finds itself in the eye of both political and economic storms.
Now, Finance Minister Cho Sung-mok has raised concerns about mounting uncertainty in the domestic economy, compounded by recent political upheavals. Now, recently, President Yoon Suk-yeol narrowly survived an impeachment vote over a short-lived martial law attempt, but questions about his leadership remain.
Well, the South Korean President Yoon Suk-yeol narrowly survived an impeachment vote in the National Assembly. The vote came after widespread backlash over a brief but controversial attempt to impose martial law earlier. Last week, that is. Critics argue this move jeopardized the country's democratic stability.
While President Yoon remains in office for now, leaders within his own ruling party have suggested his role may become largely symbolic as calls for his resignation grow louder. The political chaos comes as South Korea faces growing economic challenges. Finance Minister Cho Sung-mok addressed the nation on Sunday, warning that the country's economy is becoming increasingly vulnerable. He pledged to use all available means to protect South Korea's financial and foreign exchange markets.
The challenges are not limited to domestic factors. Globally, South Korea's export-driven economy is taking a hit. Demand for semiconductors, which make up nearly 20% of total exports, remains sluggish. Trade data from November showed a 10% year-on-year decline in exports, marking the 14th consecutive month of decline. The trade deficit has ballooned to over $45 billion in 2023, the worst since the Asian financial crisis of 1997. Now, in a bid to stabilize the economy, the government and the Bank of Korea have announced collaborative measures. Interest rates remain at 3.5%, aimed at curbing inflation while avoiding excessive pressure on borrowers.
Now, Cho emphasized that maintaining external credibility is critical, reassuring investors that the country will honor its financial commitments without compromise. In other business news, Saudi Arabia is cutting oil prices for buyers in Asia more than expected.
Aramco will reduce its premium for Arab Light crude to 90 cents a barrel in January, down from $1.70 this month.
Now, this will take the benchmark price of $72.97 per barrel. Buyers will pay $74.7 this month and $73.6 from January. The premium is defined as the difference between the market price of oil and the estimated price based on the OECD's relative industry stock level. This 47% drop in the minimum signals growing concerns over weak global demand, especially from China, which is contributing to a potential oversupply in the market.
Saudi Aramco also reduced prices for Northwest Europe and the Mediterranean. though no changes were made for North America. These price adjustments come as Brent crude remains under pressure, trading just above $71 per barrel, with global market conditions continuing to weaken.
This price reduction comes after OPEC Plus delayed its planned output increases by 3 months and extended production cuts until 2026. The extended cuts are a direct response to sluggish demand growth and the looming threat of oversupply in 2025. Brent crude prices reflect these concerns. OPEC Plus is now faced with the challenge of whether to prolong cuts into 2025 or risk a further price slump as global demand remains subdued.
Chinese students in the United States of America are facing growing anxiety as Donald Trump's January 20th inauguration approaches.
The concerns over potential travel restrictions and tighter immigration rules are prompting many to delay trips home for the lunar year. Now, the universities, including Princeton, UC Berkeley, and Cornell, are advising international students to return early from holidays to avoid re-entry issues. The 2023-2024 academic year, there were over 277,000 Chinese students in the U.S., which is down from a peak of over 372,000 in 2019 to 2020 during Trump's first term.
Now, the uncertainty amongst the Chinese students could affect the future enrollment and further strain U.S.-China ties. Some students also fear random violence or discrimination due to strained U.S.-China relations. For many, staying in the U.S. is now seen as a safer bet for their education and career prospects. This year, the number US support for Ukraine will be scaled back, saying he will probably cut the aid helping Kiev repel the Russian invasion. The interview on NBC's Meet the Press with Kristen Welker was aired on Sunday, that is, after Trump's meetings with the presidents of France and Ukraine in Paris over the weekend. Trump said he would very quickly look at the pardons for supporters jailed for storming the U.S. Capitol after his 2020 election defeat to Joe Biden.
The U.S. president-elect also asserted his threat to leave NATO, saying U.S. allies do not pay enough for their defense. He claimed that there is absolutely the possibility of America's departure, and further he stressed his campaign promises of huge tariffs, including against top U.S. trading partners Canada, Mexico, and China, which will be enacted, vowing that properly used tariffs are a very powerful tool. Trump added that he will not only wield them economically, but also for getting other things outside of economics, calling the constitutionally protected right to U.S. citizenship ridiculous.
Trump maintained that he will end, if he could, through executive action. Let's now do a quick look at what is making news in the world of sports. Well, Chelsea came from 2 goals down to defeat London rivals Tottenham Hotspur 4-3 in the English Premier League. Spurs made a fast start at home and were 2-0 up in 11 minutes, courtesy of goals from the hosts, then fell apart. Jadon Sancho started Chelsea's comeback with a brilliant strike.
McLaren are the Formula One Constructors' Champions for the first time in 26 years after Lando Norris won the season-ending Abu Dhabi Grand Prix. The 25-year-old led from start to finish, and his fourth win of the season was enough to seal the championship by 14 points. Ferrari's Carlos Sainz finished second and was followed by teammate Charles Leclerc. The race was tense. Had anything happened to Norris's car, Ferrari would have clinched the title. Lewis Hamilton signed off for Mercedes in style. The seven-time world champions finished fourth after starting 16th on the grid. He will race for Ferrari from next season.
World number one, Scotty Scheffler, picked gold earlier in the year, and this is his record, equaling 9th title of the year. The victory means
All right, over to cricket now. Pat Cummins' 5-wicket haul capped Australia's dominance in the pink ball test at the Adelaide Oval.
Well, the hosts defeated India by 10 wickets on day 3 of the second test to level the series at 1-1.
Now, India resumed the day at 128 for 5 after surrendering under the lights in the final session on Saturday. Rishabh Pant failed to survive the first over, edging Mitchell Starc to Steve Smith without adding to his overnight score of 28. Cummins then employed the short ball tactic against India's lower order with great effect. Ravichandran Ashwin had caught behind while attempting a pull shot. Harshad Rana was dismissed for a duck after fending off a rising delivery, which was caught at backward point. All-rounder Nitish Kumar Reddy top scored for India with 42 off 47 balls before falling to Scott Boland. The pacer then removed Mohammad Siraj to end India's innings on 175.
Australia needed just 19 runs to win the test and level the series. Openers Nathan McSweeney and